Pence delivers a strong rebuke to the Trump campaign during his announcement that he's running for president. The former vice president and now rival to Donald Trump gave his most aggressive criticism of his former boss, portraying him as unfit to be president and going further than ever before in condemning the character and values of the man he loyally served for 4 years. A federal grand jury in Miami continued hearing from witnesses on Wednesday in the investigation into Donald Trump's possession of classified documents as tensions ran high among his aides and advisors that charges might soon be filed against him. A band of 11 House conservatives took the rare step of joining all Democrats to block a pair of GOP bills to protect gas stoves in order to express their anger at Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Ron DeSantis, he promised to drain the swamp in Tallahassee, but instead, over more than 4 years as Florida's governor, DeSantis has reconfigured the swamp to suit his political needs, and his claim to be a reformer is getting fresh scrutiny. In anticipation of his 2024 presidential bid, he pushed the legislature to change Florida's Resign to Run law. He revised state policy so he could transfer $80 million in campaign cash to a federal political committee. And just after his official announcement last month, his administration pressured state legislators and lobbyists to aid his presidential campaign while they awaited his decisions on pet projects in the budget. Well, the Supreme Court was due to release annual financial disclosure reports today that list earnings, assets, gifts, and stock holdings as part of the judiciary's recently restated commitment to ethics standards. However, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito asked for 90-day extensions to file their reports. Chris Lick is out as chairman and chief executive of CNN, drawing a close to a rocky tenure that drew national media attention, including a lengthy profile in The Atlantic, and raised questions about the future of the cable news brand. A woman accused of fatally shooting her Florida neighbor in a dispute that involved the slain woman's children was arrested yesterday. Susan Lawrence, 58 years old, was arrested on charges of manslaughter with a firearm, culpable negligence, battery, and 2 counts of assault. Lawrence, who is white, is accused of fatally shooting African-American A.J. Owens, mother of 4, through a closed door in a small town in Florida on Friday night. Former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani says a woman's lawsuit alleging that he coerced her into sex and owes her nearly $2 million in unpaid wages is a large stretch of the imagination, filled with exaggerations and salacious details to create a media frenzy. Giuliani said in court papers that he had a consensual relationship with Noelle Dunphy for a few months in 2019 during his time as former President Donald Trump's personal lawyer, but Giuliani denies ever having a relationship with this woman that involved pressuring her for sex, and he denies that she ever worked for him. You're listening to Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. This is hour 2 of Areva Martin in real time, and this is the hour where we go behind the headlines and dig deeper into stories that people are talking about. Now, from Nikki Haley to Fox News, Republicans are obsessed with Vice President Kamala Harris. I have 2 of the nation's leading political experts and arguably the nation's foremost expert on the vice president's position in office joining me in this hour to help us understand what's up with these Republicans and their obsession with the vice president. Also, to help us understand a little more about the vice president's office in general. Johnny Carson once remarked that anyone can grow up to be president, and anyone who doesn't grow up can become vice president. And for decades, the vice president's office was a laughingstock. It was an office that was disparaged by many. People would make jokes about it. In fact, Daniel Webster turned down the chance to be on the ticket, saying, quote, I don't propose to be buried until I'm dead. End of quote. What has changed since Daniel Webster refused to become the vice president of the United States? And what has changed so that now not only is the vice president's office not a laughing stock, but it is considered a threat, at least to Republicans who are obsessed with Vice President Kamala Harris. When we come forward, my experts join us, and they're going to make us a whole lot smarter on the vice president's office and why the GOP is obsessed with Kamala Harris, right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black. KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
The office of the vice president changed when Walter Mondale was elected as vice president to Jimmy Carter. Mondale wanted to be more general advisor and troubleshooter, but to do so, he needed to have certain resources, including access to the president. He also needed his team, his people, that is, to be involved in the meetings involving the president so that they could create a set of resources that would enable Mondale to carry out his vision. What Mondale and Jimmy Carter did while Mondale was vice president really transformed the vice president's office, and the vice president that we see today, Vice President Kamala Harris, is in many ways living out the vision that Walter Mondale had as he and Jimmy Carter worked to change the stature and the status of the vice president. I am joined in this hour by Robert Shrum. He's the director of the Center for the Political Future at USC and is a veteran political strategist that I often look to on these thorny questions about our political structure. And also joining me is the nation's foremost authority on the vice president and author of The White House Vice President, The Path to Significance, Mondale to Biden. And it's former law professor Joel Goldstein. Thank you so much, Joel, and thank you, Robert, for joining me. I wanted to do this hour on the vice president because Nikki Haley, the GOP, they all seem obsessed with Kamala Harris. Nikki Haley going as far as saying that Joe Biden should take some kind of mental competency test, that he's too old, and all of that's kind of dog whistle to saying if you vote for Joe Biden, who you're really voting for is Kamala Harris. So before we talk about the obsession that the GOP has with our current vice president, let's talk about the transformation of the vice president's office. So Joe, give us that little quick history on how the vice president's office went from being a laughing stock, so much so that Daniel Webster didn't even want the job, to where now it's a job that is so significant that the GOP is in fear of who is sitting in that vice president's office.
Well, I think you really framed it very nicely. For most of our history, the vice president spent most of his time presiding over the Senate. The vice presidential candidates were chosen for reasons of ticket balancing. Oftentimes, they were ideologically opposed to the president who they served with. There was really no relationship or loyalty between the two of them. It really began to change in the Eisenhower administration when for the first time, the vice president really moves into the executive branch. But the vice president, beginning with Vice President Nixon for a quarter of a century, while they did things in the executive branch, they were really very peripheral. And then I think, as you said, the real big bang was with Carter Mondale. Carter thought it was immoral to leave the vice president uninformed and to waste resources. He thought he needed help. He and Mondale got along very well. Mondale came up with a vision of the vice president as a across-the-board advisor and troubleshooter. And they identified the resources, as you mentioned, the access, time on the president's schedule, involvement of the vice president's staff in meetings. And this really created a new model that was then followed by their successors. Reagan and George H.W. Bush followed it, Clinton, Gore, and so forth.
Bob, have we seen any examples after the Mondale and Carter example where the vice president and president didn't see eye to eye on issues, either ideological issues or, issues of governance, where there was tension between the two?
I don't think we've had the kind of tension that you saw in earlier administrations. I mean, Franklin Roosevelt basically wasn't talking to John Nance Garner most of the time when he was vice president for the first two terms. I do have to say that, a lot of vice presidents ended up becoming presidents. And while Daniel Webster's quote is very funny, the truth is, had he accepted that nomination in 1848, he would have been president by 1850. So he wouldn't have been buried, he would have been elevated.
Good point, Bob.
Now, I do believe that if you're going to have an effective vice president, and the vice president's going to have a real role of the kind Joel described, then there are going to be disagreements between the president and the vice president. I mean, Joe Biden was very skeptical about continuing the Afghanistan war when he was Barack Obama's vice president. But you want that. You want somebody who's going to push you on an issue like that. I mean, obviously, Biden lost that argument with Obama. Al Gore, and I saw this myself, pushed Bill Clinton very hard on the issue of climate and the environment in general, and had a real impact in doing that. There can be examples that are not necessarily as happy as those. I mean, I don't know that he's entirely responsible, but Dick Cheney was certainly the leading person pushing for the Iraq War, which I think was one of the biggest mistakes in the history of American foreign policy. But we now have a powerful vice president, and we often don't see, and I'd be interested in what Joel thinks about this, we often don't see that power manifested because a lot of it happens in private conversations between the president and the vice president. Now, you can be given a specific assignment, like Al Gore was given the assignment of reinventing government, trying to make it more efficient. And that's pretty visible. But some of the other stuff, you only find out when people write their memoirs or when the histories are written.
Very good point, Bob. And why don't you speak to that, Joel? Because I think the GOP's obsession with Kamala Harris suggests that they know that she's very powerful, yet we frequently hear folks malign our vice president by saying, what does she do? We don't know what she does. She's not doing anything. So she gets a lot of criticism for quote unquote not doing anything. But if the person really wasn't doing anything, it begs the question as to why folks are so obsessed with her. So give us, your take on this whole notion of how powerful this office has become.
Well, I think Bob's been in the room, and I think he explained it perfectly. I mean, the vice presidents, much of what they do is invisible, and particularly their advising role. The surest way for any vice president, Democrat or Republican, to lose influence is to go to the media and say, the president was about to drive us off the cliff, and I walked into the Oval Office and said, don't do X, do Y, and the president saw the light, and and everything.
I'm the hero.
I'm the hero. Yeah. And so really one of the norms that has grown up in this period, especially with Carter and Mondale, is that the president and vice president would talk confidentially. And that gave them the power, as Bob said earlier. You don't want a vice president to be a yes person. When Walter Mondale went to Jimmy Carter with this vision, he said, one of the things I can do for you is give you advice that you don't want to hear, or I can help you hear a wider range of advice. And so that's been one of the functions that vice presidents have served, as Biden did on Afghanistan and so forth. And so we never quite see exactly what a vice president is doing behind the scenes. What we do have access to is what she or he does in the public arena. And I think, when you look at what Vice President Harris has been doing in the public sphere, I think it's been very important, and it's been in terms of being a spokesperson on some of the important issues of concern to the administration and to reachable Democratic voters, and in addition to her foreign policy role, and I think those have been really significant contributions.
Well, a couple of things. One, I think, Bob, everyone has been waiting, or people, I shouldn't say everyone. Some folks have been waiting for Vice President Harris to get some big assignment. Like they say, Joe Biden, he got the economy, the 2008, fallout of the economy was his, baby to deal with. And they keep hoping that Harris gets something like that, not immigration, not something that's so big that's not solvable. Is that a mistake, or are people, creating some false expectations?
Oh, sure. And by the way, the number of migrants at the border has gone down, and the efforts that Vice President Harris has made, I think, with some of the countries in Central America, I think those efforts have had an impact. Look, yes, you want a visible role. And I think that we will see more and more and more of her. I mean, we saw her giving the commencement address at West Point, and we're going to see more of that as the months go on and as we head toward re-election. But I still believe that the Mondale model is the most important thing a vice president does, which is, presidents, it's easy to say, yes, sir, Mr. President. Yes, sir, Mr. President. Yes, sir. And having someone who is not tied to that is invaluable. It doesn't mean, as I said earlier, they get listened to all the time. I mean, I can give you another example from Mondale. He was very much unhappy about President Carter calling off the government for 10 or 12 days, going up to Camp David, having a whole set of meetings with people where he asked people, what am I doing wrong? And then coming down from the mountain and giving what became known as the Malaise speech, which helped provoke a primary challenge to him in 1980. Mondale was right. His advice was not taken. So I think you will see more and more of Kamala Harris in the months ahead. And I would make 2 points about this. One is there is a huge amount of sexism in this, and there's a real element of racism in it. It's an appeal to that, not necessarily that the folks doing it themselves share that view, although they're more than happy to exploit it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it's a disguised attack, not very well disguised, on Joe Biden's age. I mean, here's a guy who has accomplished as much as any president since Lyndon Johnson, and without Johnson's majorities in the Congress. And Republicans want to talk about his age. They want to keep talking about inflation, although it's coming down. They announced for president to talk about gas prices, although they're now lower than they were when he took office in real dollar terms. So it's a way to not just attack her, but to attack him, and to convey the idea that somehow or other she's some radical leftist, which is that they think they can get away with it because she happens to be an African American woman or a black woman, you're going to just see more and more and more of it as time goes on. Now, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah.
I don't think the caravans of migrants worked in 2018. I don't think that in 2022 all the scare stuff worked that Republicans were doing. They had like the worst midterm, or Biden had the best midterm of any Democratic president since John F. Kennedy in 1962. But they're going to keep doing it. And we're just going to have to live with it. And Biden's going to live with it. And Kamala Harris is going to live with it. And she's just going to go about her job.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And thank you for, pointing out the sexism and racism, because we know she has been subjected to some of the most vile critiques that have nothing to do with the job. And Joe, people's expectation of her, so when we talk about sexism and racism, it plays itself out in these kinds of questions about what has she done, as if anybody can enumerate anything that Mike Pence did. How are we to frame what the vice president does, if a big part of what the vice president does is to confidentially advise the president? So, she could be doing the most incredible job ever because it's advising Joe Biden on policy issues, keeping him from falling off a cliff, but not, as you said, running to the media, telling the media that she kept him from falling off a cliff.
Well, I think every vice president, beginning with Mondale, has been served to varying degrees as an across-the-board advisor and is sort of a surrogate for the president. But each one has done it a little bit differently. And you would expect they would do it differently because every president has a different managerial style. Every president has different needs. Every vice president has different strengths and relationships. And every president and vice president operate in a totally different political context. So one of the things that was really unfair to Vice President Harris is people would say, well, Vice President Biden did X, so isn't Vice President Harris going to do X? Well, that doesn't follow at all because President Biden might do things differently than President Obama did in certain respects. And Vice President Harris has strengths and relationships that Vice President Biden didn't have. So every time you're trying to ask, how can the vice president best add value to the administration? How can they best help you succeed? And I think that if you look at what she has done, in anticipation of the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade, and then after the decision, she has been by far the most vocal and visible voice in the administration with respect on reproductive rights. She has also been a powerful voice in the administration on really what I think is both a constitutional ideal, but an ideal of the Biden-Harris administration of inclusivity. The idea that there's a place for all of us in America and that we're all entitled to a fair shake. She's done a lot of work on climate change and a lot of events on that. And then in addition to that, if you look at the foreign travel that she's done, the United States.
I need you to hold that thought, Joe, because I want you to keep enumerating all that she has done, because I don't think the Democrats are doing a good enough job of getting that message out. And when we come forward, I want to talk about Mike Pence, because Mike Pence has done something we've never seen a vice president do, and that is to trash the president that he served under. He did that today as he announced his run for president. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader. Follow 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 the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search. We are.
I'm back. And in this hour of Areva Martin in real time, I'm breaking down with the nation's leading experts on the vice president's office, what it means to be the vice president, what we don't know about what the vice president does, and why the obsession with Kamala Harris. I'm joined by Joe Goldstein. He is one of the nation's top experts on the vice president. He is the author of The White House Vice President, The Path to Significance, Mondale to Biden, and joined by Robert Shrum. He's the director of the Center for the Political Future at USC, a veteran political strategist, and one of my go-tos on issues, particularly historical issues related to our government. So, Joe, you were giving us this laundry list of things that our illustrious vice president has done. Oftentimes people don't know and feign ignorance when it comes to the incredible work that she is doing. You talked about her work, on foreign policy, being a spokesperson on the issue of abortion access. Is there anything else that you think we are not doing a good job, we being Democrats, in terms of sounding off on in terms of what our vice president has done since she's been in office?
Well, I think there's three things that have been key. One is that I think she's taken the major issues of importance to the administration, and she's been a spokesperson on those. I think second, that she's played a pivotal role in the Biden administration's foreign policy of trying to develop relations in important areas of the world. She had a highly successful trip to Africa, several trips to Asia, where we're trying to establish strength, particularly vis-a-vis China, 4 trips to Europe and so forth. She's played a very important role, and what she has been doing is really central to other efforts of the administration in trying to strengthen America's relations. And then I think the third thing is that she really is a historic figure. She's a historic figure because she's the first. She's the first woman ever to be elected to national office in our 59th election. And because of that, she not only has significance in the United States, but she has significance around the world. I get calls from reporters around the world who are doing stories about her, or doing books about her. I never got calls when Vice President Pence or Biden or Cheney to the same extent. There's interest in her because of the historic nature of who she is. And when she gives a speech, say at West Point, like she did recently, and she's the first person to ever speak at the West Point commencement, it's a step forward, and it's a step for America moving in a direction of inclusivity, which really is one of the hallmark ideals, I think, of the Biden-Harris administration.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that again, because I get so frustrated. Oftentimes, some of my Black friends say to me, she hasn't done anything for Black people. And then I have to pull out this laundry list of Black folks who work in the administration that are there in part because she is there, and how Biden has one of the most, diverse, from, the press secretary, first Black woman to be the White House press secretary. I mean, that is huge. I mean, we can just go down a list of positions that are held now by African Americans, and we know that is in part because of Kamala Harris's presence in that White House. All right, Bob, a different kind of vice president, Mike Pence. Joel mentioned his name. I talked about him earlier in the show. He announced his run for presidency by attacking a guy he had been super, super loyal to for 4 years by saying he was unfit to be the president, and told us some of those confidential things we've been talking about that the vice president and president talk, when they're in their private moments. He told us that Trump was trying to get him, to overthrow the government, essentially. So what do we make of this historic incident today where we have a former vice president attacking a former president that he served under?
And they're both running for president.
Yes, so let's throw that in there too.
We've only had one former president who's ever been elected president again, and that's Grover Cleveland. We've come a long way from 1960, and Joel mentioned Richard Nixon's somewhat expanded role, but it was not expanded that far. He ran on the slogan, "Experience counts," and President Eisenhower was asked famously at a news conference, can you name one thing where he's had a big impact? And Eisenhower responded, "If you give me a week, I might think of something," which became, by the way, one of the first classic negative ads in the history of American politics, because the Kennedy campaign plastered it all over the country on television screens everywhere. But I think that might apply to Mike Pence. If you gave me a week, I might think of something. I can think of one. For most of the administration, all he did, other than reinforce what I think Trump was going to do anyway in terms of being very conservative on social issues, all he did was basically function as a yes man. But there came a point at which that broke. And it broke, and he ought to get credit for this. It broke on January 6th. And in the days leading up to it, when the president wanted him to throw out the Electoral College votes, try to get the election over to the House, where we have this odd rule that you vote by state delegations, not by the majority of House members. And that would have resulted in Trump being reelected. And Pence, I think, thought about it, examined his conscience, talked to people about it. He talked to Dan Quayle, of all people, one of the most ridiculed vice presidents in modern history. And Quayle said, "You have no authority to turn down the electoral votes. You have to open them and read them, and that's it. That's your job. And then you say who got the most electoral votes and is therefore president of the United States." That, I think, was the moment where he broke. Now, look, as a result of that, he has a 37% unfavorable in the Republican Party. He's running for president. He's going to focus in Iowa. where about 65% of the Republican caucus electorate consists of self-identified evangelicals. And Pence, as the most conservative candidate on social issues, is going to spend a ton of time in Iowa and try to win those caucuses. One of the odd things, though, I would say about that, it's not true of Democrats, but it's certainly true of Republicans. It's been a long time since a Republican who won the Iowa caucuses actually won the presidency. It's actually been 24 years.
Yeah, interesting, because you're right. He did buck Trump on January 6th, and he did just open the envelope and read what was contained inside, and Biden became the president. But Joe, we also have seen Mike Pence waver on what happened on January 6th. He hasn't always been so forthright about what Trump tried to get him to do, and he hasn't always been so forthright about how Trump was unfit for office. He has been an apologist for Donald Trump and his actions on January 6th. What are we to make of that? Because this is a new Mike Pence. This is not the Mike Pence that we've seen, just a couple of months ago on this very issue.
Yeah, it struck me that his statement today was much stronger than anything he said up to this point. And there were many times when I've thought to myself that that if somebody had put me and my wife and my family in the position that Trump played a role in Pence being in on January 6th, and then did nothing to protect him, didn't even call him to ask him if he was okay or send help, I would have been much more, I think, vocal about my outrage than Pence has been so far. And the other thing is that Vice President Pence, even into the early days in January, while I agree with Bob that he does deserve credit for following the Constitution and the law on January 6th, he was sending out some mixed signals in terms of some of his rhetoric. But I think that one of the things that is intriguing to me, and I'd be interested in Bob's take on this, is it seems to me that he's really raised the issue that now every Republican candidate is going to be asked, do they think that Trump is disqualified based on what he did on January 6th? And everybody else is going to have to take a position on that issue, I would think.
Yeah, when we come forward, we'll get your response to that, Bob, because you're right, Joe. None of the other candidates have even gone anywhere near January 6th. And in fact, some have tried to reframe January 6th, blaming it on the FBI, blaming it on Democrats who were feigning to be Trump supporters. So, Bob, when we come forward, we'll get your take on whether now all 9 of those other candidates running for the GOP presidency are going to have to respond to the question of whether Donald Trump is unfit. And I want to talk about, these other Democrats that want to line up against Kamala Harris, who may be running for president herself in 2028. When we come forward, KBLA Talk 1580.
Gifted and black. At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Vice, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar, shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.
All right, Bob, you are on the hot seat. Do the other 9 candidates running to be the Republican nominee for president have to answer the question of whether Donald Trump is unfit to be the president based on how he conducted himself on January 6th?
Yeah, I don't think Chris Christie will have any problem answering that question. He doesn't have much chance of winning. He's very unpopular in the Republican Party, but he's running to be the Trump Terminator. And so I think he'd say, that's not the only reason he's unfit. Let me give you 10 more. Even though he was on the Trump train all the way up until the President Trump started denying the results of the election. Yeah, they're all going to get asked. And the irony is that to get on the debate stage and get asked, they're going to have to pledge under the RNC rules that have been established for the Republican debates that they will support the nominee no matter who it is. So they could be in this rather anomalous position of having signed this document saying they're going to support someone who 1 or 2 of them or 3 of them might say is unfit. Most of them will not say that.
Particularly those that are running to be vice president, which I suspect Tim Scott and Nikki Haley fall into that category. They're never going to criticize Donald Trump.
Well, that's part of it. Nikki Haley's criticized him mildly on some foreign policy stuff. But I think it's partly vice president. It's also partly the mistake of 2016. Everybody thought Trump would ultimately fall apart, and they wanted to inherit his support. So they weren't going to go after him. And when Chris Christie gave his announcement speech last night, he said, look, that was a mistake. We were wrong. But I think a lot of them still are in that mindset. Trump has a big lead. I do think it's going to get much more complicated for Trump. I mean, if he does...
there's a headline now about these indictments being imminent from the special counsel on this, classified document issue. So not only is it going to get complicated, they're going to have to decide, do they address the unfit question, but are they, Joe, going to talk about the fact that the guy is indicted in Manhattan by a state prosecutor and now, potentially is indicted by this federal prosecutor? Can you be running for president and not mention that the guy running with you has 2 indictments?
No, I think that's certainly going to be part of the discussion. I think, as Bob suggested in the last one, different people will handle it differently. And Some will attack the prosecutors, and some will attack Mr. Trump. But it's certainly going to be part of the discussion, both in the primary and then in the general election.
Yeah, I want to talk about the presumptive nominee to be the candidate for the Democratic Party. So you said earlier, Bob, that most vice presidents have gone on to become president, or at least they run. So we would expect if Biden wins this next election in 2024, that would be true in 28 of Kamala Harris, that she would be the presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. Yet we hear a lot of folks saying, oh, no, she can't be the candidate. She can't win. She's Black. She's a woman. She's not strong enough, blah, 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 blah. And we have folks like Gavin Newsom and, others suggesting that they are preparing themselves to be the candidate in 2028. Are we going to see something change in the way that Democrats treat their vice president when we get to 2028 and Kamala Harris should be the presumptive nominee?
Well, we have a long way to go before we get there. And the history of the modern era is that a lot of vice presidents have gone on to win their party's nomination, but not without being challenged. George H.W. Bush had a lot of challenges in 1988. Al Gore was challenged by Bill Bradley in 2000, although Gore went on to win every single primary and caucus, which no non-incumbent has ever done or had ever done before. I think that if Biden is reelected, and I believe he will be, and if they have a successful second term, she will be a much stronger candidate by then. There's also a demographic shift going on in America. Older people, and I shouldn't say this since I resemble the remark, are aging out of the electorate. And younger people who are more tolerant and more open are going to have more power. So I think that by the time we get to 2028, she will be a formidable candidate, but I think it's very unlikely that there will not be other candidates who will run as well.
What do you think, Joe? Do you think the attacks that she has been enduring since she became vice president, and which will continue in this election coming up for 24, and we should expect them to continue even in a successful Biden-Harris administration, that those attacks weaken her?
Well, I think Bob's analysis is exactly right. I think that one of the disadvantages that I think she had, particularly in the first few years of the administration, was that that normally when you're elected vice president, you have the first term to be vice president, and then after you get reelected, you can start thinking about or running for president. In her case, because there was sort of some ambiguity about what President Biden would do until he made the announcement, I think there was some ambiguity, and it made people look at Vice President Harris's position with sort of an ambiguity. Was her year 2024 or 2028? I think that now she's in a stronger position. I think that that if you look at all of the other people in the Democratic Party, they would much rather be where she's sitting than being a senator or a governor or a representative or any other position. I think the vice presidency is the best springboard, and if the administration is successful, she'll be in a strong position. But sure, the attacks are going to continue, particularly on the Republican side. And when you get into a primary, I mean, Bill Bradley went after Al Gore. Bob Dole went after George H.W. Bush, and as did Jack Kemp. That's what happens when different people run for president.
Bob, let me ask you this. So some folks are criticizing Biden. They said that Biden didn't do enough to protect his Vice President Harris. What do you make of that comment? And should he be doing more? And secondly, how should the Democratic Party handle this notion that the Republicans are trying to plant in the minds of voters that Biden isn't really running to be president for the next 4 years? He's running so that he can retire or something to, hand over the office to Vice President Harris.
I think you'll see a two-pronged Democratic campaign. One will be about the accomplishments of the administration, and they won't overclaim, but they have a lot they can claim credit for. And the other will be, look at what's on the other side. Look at the dangers to democracy. Look at the dangers to women's rights, reproductive rights, LGBT rights. I think that will be the Democratic campaign. I don't think the smartest thing to do here would be to mount some kind of Kamala Harris rehabilitation tour as part of the campaign. I think you go about your business, you keep governing, and at the end of the day, I think that she will be renominated. She will, I believe, be reelected along with Joe Biden. But one thing you got to understand about Biden, by the way, that I think is critical here, is he's about governing. You know, and Joel mentioned earlier that the major roles, how the roles shift that vice presidents play. Well, the reason she's not playing the role he played, which is negotiating with Congress, is because he was in the Senate for decades, and he is an expert negotiator in terms of how to get something done in the Congress.
Yeah, no, great point there. Well, guys, we got to leave it there. Great insights. I feel so much smarter, and I'm sure everyone that's listening and watching can attest to the same. Whenever you're on, Bob, I learned so much, and Joe, I know why they call you the world's most, brilliant person on the issue of the vice presidents in the office. Again, you're the author of The White House Vice President: The Path to Significance, Mondale to Biden. Make sure you pick up a copy of it. The vice president, as role is important, as you heard my two experts say, and the GOP is fixated with our vice president because she is powerful, she's capable, she's effective, and she's doing exactly what she was elected to do, which is kick a whole lot of butt. So we're proud of her. Thank you so much, Joel. Thank you, Robert. The next voice that you hear will be Robin Ayers and the Raw Report right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Gifted and black. At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you.
Nearly 100 million people in 18 states are under air quality.